Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We are the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. With me tonight, as always, my good friend, Mr. Drew Crowley. What's up, Drew?
Howdy, sir. Not a whole lot. As we are recording this, I am recovering from a week of shows and the future in-laws being here and just general debauchery. So today was a lot of DoorDash and watching trash TV. How about yourself?
well, we had, as we're recording on Mother's Day, so this was a very laid back day. We did not, Cindy didn't want to do anything out of the ordinary, so to speak. We went out and had some barbecue with our son Will and his wife Christina and our two grandkids, and then our son Sam came down for a little while this afternoon. So we just had a family day. So it was good.
Outstanding. That
Yeah,
sounds lovely.
cannot complain about that. But we've got a show for you today that is going to be a little different. We've got a friend of mine from way back, way back, actually. And we'll get into that when we bring him on. It is Jimmie Bratcher, and Jimmie has a new album out called Far Enough. And we'll look forward to telling you about that and hearing everything he has to say about that. But before we bring Jimmie in and get on with that, we want to tell you about the Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who make content for the bourbon and whiskey enthusiast. We have shows like Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. They will talk with distillers from across the country, around the world, about how did the thing in your bottle get in your bottle. It's a fascinating show. They do some really great deep dives with distillers from all kinds of different backgrounds. Alan also does a show called One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. On that show, if you are a distiller or want to be a distiller, whether illicit or otherwise, you can email Alan a question, and Alan will give you a response to that question by posting it on YouTube and Facebook. So that's a really fun deep dive into nerdy stuff. Speaking of nerdy stuff, we have our friends Pat and Mike over at My Whiskey Den. My Whiskey Den is where craft whiskey is king. That show is every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central. Be sure to tune in. Those guys have a lot of fun. They have some great guests, and the good people in the chat are always fun to hang out with. We also want to tell you one more thing about our own show. So watch this.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that bell notification to find out when new episodes are coming out, which do come out every single Wednesday on all of the services: Spotify, Apple Music, Google, maybe Amazon, definitely YouTube. And always hit that like button, but hit it an odd number of times, so then that way it stays as a like.
Thanks, Mike. It's very appropriate that Mike is wearing his Kansas City Royals hat tonight because our guest is actually from Kansas City. And what's in my glass is from Kansas City.
Ooh, tell us about that.
This is J. Rieger's 6-year bottled in bond bourbon.
All right.
And, I'm thinking, okay, Kansas City whiskey, what's this going to be like? Trying not to be a snob, which, sometimes is easier than others. Really, really good. This is nice cotton candy and syrup on the nose and on the palate. A little bit of cherry in there. That confectioner's kind of spun sugar, cotton candy, whatever, however you want to call it. That's in there, and a little like honey nut Cheerio. So really good stuff. Highly recommend it. Pick up a bottle if it's in your area today. I don't know that we get much of their stuff here in Louisville, but we have friends.
Yes, we do. Yeah, it's not overly common. I actually got a chance to go and pick up a bottle of that when I was in Kansas City a few months back, and that is really, really good whiskey.
Yeah.
Big fan of that one.
Very impressed. And what are you drinking?
So I am drinking Old Grandad 114 tonight. For those in the Louisville area, you may know that has not been readily
Right.
available recently. I don't know if I've heard all kinds of rumors, bottling line errors, glass shortages,
Yeah.
distribution issues. Who knows? You get a different story every time you talk to somebody. But I found one today on my weekly Kroger pickup run for 26 and change. So
Yep.
I brought one home and it is everything I missed about it. It's got the nice, peanut brittle and cinnamon note. You get just a little bit of the cherry kind of. I mean this in the correct way. The medicinal cherry. It's not Robitussin-y, but it's got
Mhm.
just kind of that little bit of kind of a cherry funk to it. So
Yep.
I am enjoying this bottle thoroughly today.
Yeah. I love the Old Granddad. If they're working towards making Old Grand 114 allocated, though, I may be out.
Listen, we'll save that for another show, but there are several
Yep.
things that have gone that route that I am out on. I was
Yep.
just very happy to see that one back on shelves today.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. I'm a big fan of the Old Granddad, whether it's the bottled and bond or the 114. You get
Hmm.
down into what is it, the 86 proof?
Yeah, I think it's
You
80.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah, 80 proof. You kind of lose me there. But the bottled and bond and the 114, fantastic stuff. So
absolutely. Agreed.
yeah.
Well, yeah, speaking of Kansas City guests, I'm sure we'll get into this more later with Jimmy, but I have found not one single whiskey that goes as good with brisket and ribs as Old Granddad 114. So Uh, before we get into fat guy tasting notes of the night and all that stuff, if you're doing Kansas City style barbecue, you need to have a bottle of OGD 114 on hand. You heard it here first.
All right. Well, we'll make sure that we do that. Okay, we have to have a barbecue cookout now and drink Old Granddad 114. So
I
that's
see no
life is
problems
tough.
with this.
Life is
Yeah.
life is very tough. Okay, so we're going to without further ado, we're going to bring in Jimmie. So you're really going to enjoy hearing his story. He's I, the thing that I always say about Jimmie Bratcher is Jimmie is the real deal.
Mm.
And when we're talking to him, you'll see exactly what I mean. So join us in welcoming Jimmie to our show. So we have with us today a very good friend of my family for a very long time, Reverend Jimmie Bratcher. Jimmie, welcome to Bourbon Turntable, sir.
Hey, man. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Drew. I'm thrilled
Yeah.
to be here.
Well,
Welcome.
we're thrilled to have you. This is a great opportunity to tell everybody about your new album, which you had the album release concert as we're recording this a couple of nights ago at Knuckleheads in Kansas City. You are a Kansas City guy,
I am.
and actually the 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 first time I'd seen you, and I don't know how long, was actually at Knuckleheads.
That's right.
I was wrong hand. Here we go. Going to see the Cold Stairs play at Knuckleheads. I'd gone in to visit with a friend, and we went to see the Cold Stairs play there. And you walk in the room, and you hear some lunatic shouting at you.
Well, and the bad part about stuff like that is you were out of context.
That's right.
It's like, who is this? And then I have to, my senior mind has to go. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Cindy Rose.
Yes.
Oh, now I got it.
Yeah. But I hadn't seen you in a long time, and was thankful to see you there. But actually, the way we connected on social media, I'd seen that you had posted something or commented on a post that Chris Tapp had made at the Cold Stairs. And I thought, Jimmie Bratcher, holy cow. And so I quickly followed you on Instagram there, and we kind of connected through that. And then here we are.
Yeah,
So
those guys came on my radar, and And I said, man, are you guys out touring? You need to come to Kansas City. And Frank Hicks, the owner of Knuckleheads, is a friend of mine. And so I instantly sent him an email and said, hey, you need to have these guys. And they came in, and I actually I opened for them once, and the day before the show, my bass player got COVID.
Oh,
So
man.
I did the show as a solo, which was fine, but it wasn't like, my band deal. And so those are some great men. I love those guys, and I love what their music is and all that they've written and represent.
Yeah,
Yeah, us
they're
too.
fantastic. Yeah. We've been fortunate to have Chris on the show a couple times, and I've seen them live a few times. And
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, you guys were in Evansville or someplace. Or
a little more than a couple weeks ago, but yeah, we saw them in Evansville,
right.
and then again in Nashville for their album release
Oh,
party.
yeah, that's
So,
right.
yeah, but enough of just reminiscing about things like that. Jimmie, kind of, you've got a great story to tell, so I'll just kind of just clear the stage for you to kind of tell what your story is, so people can get to know you, and then that'll kind of I think set the stage for the conversation on music, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Yeah. So I grew up here in Kansas City. Great family, great parents, and but undisciplined. And so I was, for my childhood, I was looking for, where the ditch is at, where's the boundaries at on this thing. And so I met my wife, Sherry, when I was 19. I met her at the first American tour of a band called Black Sabbath at Memorial Hall here in Kansas City. And my joke is I couldn't tell if she was really that beautiful or if I was hallucinating. And so shortly after we met, we started seeing each other. She got pregnant, and 6 months into the pregnancy, we stumbled into the Clay County Courthouse in Liberty, Missouri, and got a marriage license and got married. And it was a horrible experience. And 3 years into our marriage, we got in a fight one night that I lost. And 3 days later, after having reconstructive surgery on my face, my grandmother came to visit me, and she looked at me and she said, baby, I will give you the money if you just get a divorce. And I tell people, it's like, your marriage is really jacked up if Granny will pay for the divorce. So Sherry and I wrote a book called Granny Paid for the Divorce, and for our divorce. And so after the divorce was final, child support was being paid for, son Jason was born. And we started seeing each other about a year later. And of course, we couldn't tell my grandmother because she wanted her money back. But we got a marriage license, and Sherry had been invited to this little church in Northwest Missouri, and in Caldwell County, Hamilton, Missouri, the birthplace of J.C. Penney, James Cash. And I said, I want that pastor to marry us. So we stumbled in there on a Sunday night unannounced, and I presented a marriage license to him, and he said, listen, he said, your wife, Sherry's trying to serve the Lord, and you're an alcoholic drug addict, and I will not join that mess together. That's a quote. And but then he came back a little bit later and he said, okay, I will marry you tonight, but you are going to believe on Jesus Christ tonight. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I had no intentions of doing that. It wasn't on my radar. I remember waiting for church to be over, and then they were going to do this little wedding ceremony after church, thinking, this doesn't change anything. This doesn't make any change in my life. Everything's going to be the same. I'm going to play music. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And after church, we had this little wedding and got down on our knees, and the love of God invaded my heart, and I was completely transformed. I got up from there a completely different individual. And And so we started then our new life together, newly married couple. 10 months later, my daughter Amanda was born, and we stayed up in Hamilton, Missouri from 1977 until 1994. We moved from there to St. Joseph, Missouri. Sherry and I took associate pastors positions in a large church there. It was an unusual church. St. Joe's about 70,000 people, not connected to a metropolitan area.
Wow.
And we were in the top 20 fastest growing churches of America. We got there in 94. The church was about 700. When we left in 2000, it was about 4,000. So we left there. The Lord spoke to me one day. I've heard this voice in my heart. I know that might sound strange to some people, but I heard this voice in my heart that said, "Can you do this for the rest of your life?" And my answer was, yes. We're very successful. And, all the success that we had. And then the voice said, "And be happy." And I said, no. And the reason I said no is because I had these dreams in my heart. And I knew that if I stayed there, I would never get to fulfill those dreams. And part of the dream was all I've ever wanted to do was play guitar and write music and sing. And so we resigned our positions on March 1st, 2000 and started. And we had no idea what we were going to do, how we were going to support ourselves. At that time, well, when I first, I have to back up a minute. When we first came to faith, one of the first things the pastor told me, he said, "Son, you got to quit playing that devil music." And so I did. I felt like it was more important for me to raise my kids than it was to play rock and roll. So I played a bunch of Southern gospel stuff, acoustic guitar stuff. Did an album, which you will never hear, hopefully. And it's not bad, but it's just not who I am. And so then when we took the position in 94 at the big church, they already had a fabulous music guy. And so my music was kind of just out there. And so at 45 years old, I'm now free from all of that. I'm traveling, speaking in churches primarily, and I get an invitation from a guy named Larry Howard. And Larry Howard was one of the founders involved in the Southern rock movement in Macon, Georgia. He was a second guitar player in a band, Grinder Switch, if you know Grinder Switch at all. They were a band that they had one gig at Grant's Lounge in Macon. Their second gig was opening the Atlanta Pop Festival for the Allman Brothers.
Oh, wow.
So Larry invited me to Macon, Georgia, and I went down and we did my first album, Honey in the Rock, in 2001.
Yeah.
And so I started then, and then
which is a very good album, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I enjoy that.
It was, at that time, it's like, I want to do this kind of gospel blues influenced gospel thing. And man, there's nothing out there. So you have to be a songwriter. So I started writing and did that album. I did another album with Larry a couple of years later. And so the album that we just released on April 21st is my 13th album. So we've been 23 years on the road traveling, taking the blues to probably the most hostile audience in the world, church people. So,
amen.
And it's been a really, it's been an interesting journey because, I hear this all the time. It's like, I play in church and I try to not like dumb it down. I try to be true to who I am and what I do. And that's hard in that environment, but I can do it. And what I hear all the time is, I don't really like blues music, but I like this. And so we have, created this environment where, I'd be in churches. This last weekend was a a perfect example of what I like my schedule to look like. Friday night, we were at Knuckleheads doing our album release party. Saturday morning, we were in Chillicothe, Missouri at the Women's Correctional Center there, with about 400 women telling a story, which I'll mention later. And then this Sunday morning, we were in a church here in Kansas City. And so that's a typical format of what we do. So we'll be in music venues, biker rallies. We played Sturgis, played the Buffalo Chip, opened for Willie Nelson, opened for the Doobie Brothers there. We'll do, like in June, we have a thing we call the Transformation Tour that we do in Kansas. We'll take a full band and crew. We'll be in a couple of prisons in June. One of them will have 950 inmates on the yard, and which is completely unheard of. We just did a thing on February 25th at Parchman Farm.
Yeah.
If you know what Parchman Farm is, it's a 20,000 acre facility, 9 prisons, 4,800 inmates, maybe the most violent, horrific prison in America. And they invited us, the head of the Department of Corrections invited our team to do 5 weeks there. And so we were one of the weeks of the 5 weeks, took the whole crew, went down, played for an enthusiastic crowd of about 300 inmates, every race, every religion, every gang was represented, one guard. We gave each of them a copy of my book, Don't Take Your Dreams to the Grave. And it was just a tremendous privilege for us to be able to do that. So that's kind of a summary of what we have done. We're outside of the music, mainstream. I mean, we are getting radio play right now around the world. We have a great publicist that's helped to achieve that. The album Far Enough, last Monday, I don't even know what day. Oh, it was May 8th. That it came out on Roots Music Report as number 2 in the top 50 blues rock albums based on radio play. And
Awesome.
so I got a top 10 record, and nobody knows who I am.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and we're doing that. So so you just tell me where you want to go from there.
Well, let's kind of back up to the music part of it first, and then we'll kind of rebuild the story from there.
All right.
So you're a blues guy, but was when you got your first, what was your first album that you ever had, that you ever bought? What was your first album?
I was a Ricky Nelson fan.
Okay.
So back in the late 50s, I can remember I was about 5 or 6 years old. My dad took me, of course, Ricky Nelson was on TV then.
Right.
He was the first video star. For those of you that don't know that, he was the first guy to really do, like live rock and roll on TV. And so I did that. But I always go back to this point in my life. My favorite album still to date is Jimi Hendrix' Axis Bold as Love.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
I simultaneously had that and Live at Folsom Prison with Johnny Cash. So I have this completely different, eclectic, thing. So that's where my musical taste kind of started.
Yeah.
My mom and dad were into both kinds of music, country and western.
Yes.
And so, Hendrix was the kind of the catalyst of those, of my journey to start that. And then I found in 1970, I found the Howlin' Wolf London Sessions.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you're familiar with that album or not, but you should be. So it was, Howlin' Wolf, Hubert Sumlin, Clapton, Steve Winwood, Charlie Watts, Bill Wymans, and that was the album that just like sunk me into the blues as a whole. Was that particular album.
Yeah.
So do you remember what your first concert that you ever went to was?
Yeah, I do. It was the last concert that Patsy Cline ever gave.
Oh, wow.
I was maybe, I don't even remember how old I was. I was just a child, because the only thing I remember is my grandfather holding me on his shoulders so that I could see what was going on. But it was a concert that she did at Memorial Hall here in Kansas City, which was where I met Sherry. Um, and and it was her and Hawkshaw Hawkins and all those famous celebrities that, several of them died in the plane crash with Patsy. And then from there, my next concert as a teenager was Steppenwolf.
Oh, wow.
All right.
And I got to see some fabulous things. This concert that I really tell people about that was the most amazing. There was a tour coming through the Midwest on a Tuesday night at Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas. 3 bands. Nobody really knew who they were, but it was in order: Jethro Tull. And if you've never heard the Jethro Tull album, it's a progressive blues album.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green
Yes.
and Joe Cocker.
Dude.
And only a couple hundred people showed up in a 3,500 seat hall.
Oh,
And,
wow.
it was an amazing night, and it snowed. So one of those things. Same place in there. I got to stand on the stage with my elbows on the stage and watch Delaney and Bonnie and Eric Clapton.
Holy crap.
Wow. Man.
And the biggest regret that I have was I was in Memphis, which I spent a lot of time in Memphis growing up.
Mhm.
And the Atlanta Pop Festival was going on. So it'd have been 70 or 71. And the bands were then coming out of the festival, and they were coming to Memphis. And so there was one band on the bill I knew, which was Mountain, with Leslie West, Felix Pappalardi, Corky Lang. And I didn't know who the other band was. And they were 3 hours late getting the concert started. And so Mountain came out and played. And the other band, I didn't know who it was, so I walked out. And it was the Allman Brothers Band. And I regret that one for sure. That was definitely a regret in my life, that I didn't stick around and see that. But anyway, so that kind of was a long answer to your.
Yeah. So when did you start playing?
I started playing when I was about 13 years old. My dad, one weekend, I was, starting to cause some trouble, and my dad played guitar. He played bluegrass, country kind of thing. And I was starting to get into some trouble. He borrowed an electric guitar and amplifier. It was summertime, and he borrowed it from a guy at work and brought it home for the weekend. And I did not leave the house. And he had, he had an extra car in the driveway, which would be worth a ton of money right now. It's a 1958 DeSoto, 2-door Hemi. And just big fins, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic car. And he ran an ad in the Kansas City paper. Will trade 1958 DeSoto Hemi for electric guitar and amplifier. And we got one phone call. And I walked out with this Gibson SG Junior and a little Gibson Falcon amplifier, which I have back over here in my mess back over here. And that was it. And so I've had this guitar. I've busted it. It's been refinished 3 times. And actually, it's a great story because I had it refinished. It was red. It's actually on the cover of Honey in the Rock. And I'm holding this refinished red. It's really beautiful. A friend of mine that built guitars refinished it. But after that, a few years, I thought, I'd like to have this guitar look like it did when my dad gave it to me. And I took it to Dave Seif here in town, who's built some guitars for me. And he's a paint chemist by trade. And he takes the guitar and he picks it up and he looks down in it like this. And he looks up at me and says, that white paint's still under there. And so he gave me this stripper and I started on it. And so this is the original paint on this guitar.
Oh, wow.
After being primered black, painted Pelham blue, clear coat, gray primer, red paint, 17 coats of lacquer, and there it is, the original paint. So
That's so cool.
So that's when I started playing. Was when I was about 13.
Wow.
That's great. Oh, I'm gonna have so many guitar geared nerd questions for you later, but we'll save them.
No, go ahead, Drew. This is perfect time.
No, so just, obviously with you being a blues player, and SG is a little shocking, but not all that much since you were kind of a rock and roll guy. So give me your typical little rig rundown. What are you reaching for when you're writing? What are you reaching for when you're recording? That kind of a thing.
Well, recording I'm doing here at home. I'm recording my guitars here at home. I'm using a UA Audio aux box for that, and running it in through various heads that I have here.
Sure.
Usually it's all set up and you can see it in here, but we had a gig Friday night, so I got equipment piled everywhere. So that's my typical recording gig. And then what was your other question? You had two questions.
Oh, just what you were doing for live as well, and like writing kind of a thing. Like,
Okay. So for live stuff, I have a guy here in town named Jeff Gearing. He's probably only known on the Gear page if you go there. He's an amplifier expert. He's just a local guy here in town. He builds the amps that I use. He just kind of builds them when he wants. And so I recently had commissioned him to build an amp for me that's his model called Dark Star, but this is a junior. So it's a 20-watt amp, and it's just perfect because you can get it just to the edge of breakup, and it's right at the right volume to be right above a drum kit. And so it's perfect for stage volume, but it sounds fantastic. And then writing, I mean, I only write when I have a deadline. So
Gotcha.
I'm always writing down ideas. I'm always taking notes. Anytime I feel inspired for something, I'm writing it down, or I'm using my phone as a voice recorder.
Sure.
And just using that and writing on it. But I am recording all of my guitars here. I just find it easier to work here. I've done some on the new album. We did some at a friend of mine's studio south of here. But for the most part, I'm doing all that here.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I've got just a couple more questions if you'll indulge me. Excuse me. So obviously, having listened to, this most recent record, I've read a portion of your book, listened to some of the back, catalog as well. Your lyrics are very much intentional, right? So as far as the song crafting process goes, as a guitar player and obviously as an intentional songwriter, where are you starting that? Does that come from an idea? Like you mentioned, you're writing on a deadline. Do you have a bunch of riffs in your head, or, kind of that you're fooling around with and they just can join? How does that process work for you? And then I've got one more.
Well, I take the pieces that come from wherever they come, whenever they come. So I have, like on the new album, there's a song that's kind of out of character. It's not a blues song. It's more of an Americana song called Winnie Dreams. And which is about a blind cowboy. That's about as far away from the blues as you can get.
Oh, it's a great tune.
It's about a blind cowboy, and the process in that song. So I on the new album, I worked with my friend Eric Stark, who is a tremendous musician, tremendous songwriter, a multi-instrumentalist, crazy talented, and has soul. And so I had a slide riff that I had recorded in 2010. And I just, on my voice recorder, had this slide riff. And every now and then, especially if I'm flying somewhere, I'll put in earbuds and I'll go through those as references. And the old preacher cliche is the target. And that is, if it don't burn in you, it won't burn in them. And so, if I have an idea or a song lyric or whatever, I'll let it sit and then go back and see if I'm still as passionate about it as that. So I had recorded this slide riff in 2010, and as we were writing, I played it for Eric, and I said, "Hey, I got this idea. It's a slide riff. The only thing I know about this song is it's a Western." And that was all I knew. And so I sent it to him, and he came back with that song. And
awesome.
And so I take those ideas from wherever, whenever, however. So I have files of just single lines or files of a hook or a chorus or a verse idea. On the album, there's a song called My Name is Sinner, which is really represented in the cover art because the cover art was taken at an event that we do every month that has 5 Mondays in it under a bridge at First and Grand in Kansas City.
Yep.
There's a nearby homeless encampment. And there's an organization here in town whose mission is to take a church service to those people. And that's what they do. They take them to church service, music, do all those things. And that those people in their eyes, it just, they just were screaming at me. I mean, I'd see them and it's like, they were saying to me, what can you do? What can you say to me that's going to make a difference in my condition? And they feed everybody down there too after the event. And so from that, I wrote this song called My Name is Sinner. And the thing about this album is that all the songs are stories, and it's not, I really don't consider myself to be so much a blues player, like a straight up blues player. And with the songs on this, and one of the reasons I don't do that is that I want to have time and room to tell the story. And I think the stories are the most important. And so a lot of songs on the album are long. I think the song Don't Bring That Evil Around Here is like 7 minutes long. So, and I did, I intentionally, it's like, and people will say, well, you have to have a 3-minute song for radio. And it's like, why? I mean, I understand why, and there's some 3-minute songs on there, but why do I have to fit into that format anymore? It's like, if the most popular long format podcast is averaging 3 hours, surely I can write a 7-minute song,
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for such a thorough answer. I'm fascinated by the process of how songs evolve and then come to be what we all experience them as listeners. So, thank you for that. Just one more from my end, and then I'm sure we'll have more as time goes on. But I have a little bit of some roots in Kansas City area. I've spent the first few years of my life there, and that's where we do our family get together every year for the Royals opening day.
Okay.
So all the kids are spread out across the U.S. So love Kansas City, but I need to hear from a native. What is the best place to see live music, and what is the best barbecue in Kansas City?
Well, I would have to say, I mean, there's a lot of live music here in Kansas City. Knuckleheads is my favorite. There's 4 stages there. Like Friday night, all 4 stages were running. And and they vary in size. The stage that we were on, that area, they actually bought the street from the city. So they own the street, and they can block the street off. That stage holds about 1,000 people. The saloon stage holds about 220. The gospel lounge, which is my favorite room to play in, is about 90. And then the garage, which is the newest part of the venue, is about 500. So that's it. And if you want my comments on barbecue, my 2021 album was called I'm Hungry. And we wrote a cookbook, 190-page cookbook, the family and I did, called I'm Hungry. But on I'm Hungry, which, by the way, spent 7 weeks in the top 10 of the Roots Music Report's Contemporary Blues Albums chart. On there is a song called Where You Gonna Stop? And it's a directory of about 16 different barbecue joints in Kansas City.
All right.
The question is, where are you going to stop? So my personal favorite is not my wife's because it's so greasy, is a place called LC's. But we were just at Arthur Bryant's last week having ribs. But yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. I'm a big Arthur Bryant's fan. I like Oklahoma Joe's for whatever it is.
Well, now wait a second.
It's a little more convenient,
Wait a
but
minute.
JC's.
Wait a minute.
All right.
So when Joe's came to town, it was called Oklahoma, and I would not go there because
Okay.
it was against the law to have a barbecue joint in Kansas City named Oklahoma.
I understand.
And
I
they
understand.
changed the name. They dropped the Oklahoma, so it's Joe's KC now.
Got it. My sincerest of apologies.
And I will say I love their food. And one that if you haven't tried it, if you haven't been to Q39, that and have the ribs, or they have a beef rib. It's like a brisket on a stick, man. It's so good. It's so
All
good.
right.
Yeah,
so I will start planning the itinerary for the next KC trip immediately.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Awesome.
If you
Good
need
stuff.
help when you're here in town, just call me.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, no. When I was there, we ate at Arthur Bryant's, and it was fantastic. But
Yeah.
I know I wasn't there long enough to try everything I needed to. But so you started out listening to Hendrix and Clapton, and is that kind of what directed you towards the music that you were playing in your early days?
Mm-hmm.
The days before you were born again.
Yeah. And I was, when Sherry and I went through the divorce, then I started playing country music. So I sold my Les Paul and bought a Telecaster and a pedal steel. And so the country rock thing was happening at that time. And that was a big thing. And so I have all that influence, and you find that throughout my music. My friend Jim Gaines, who produced a couple of my albums, Jim's the legendary producer from Memphis, known, multi-Grammy winner. He won a Grammy on Santana's Supernatural album for a mix that he did on that. He won a Grammy on Stevie Ray's Instep record, which he produced. But we were talking one day, and he said something that later he thought he was being offensive when he said it, but it really spoke to me a lot. He said, you're really not a lead guitar player. You're a singer-songwriter, and your albums are going to be all over the road. Your songs are going to be all over the road. And that really liberated me to really allow myself to be who I am and not try to fit into a genre specific box. If that makes any sense. It's like I have kind of some parameters of some things that I like, but and the new album really displays that.
Yeah. So. Now, are you largely self-taught in terms of the guitar?
Yeah. I'm like the worst guy in my band, and then I tell people, it's like, look, if you hear something that I'm playing that sounds like it's a mistake, it's not a mistake. It's jazz. I'm just going outside. So yeah.
But I think that I'd read or heard that you have a bit of a different style in playing, or I'm not telling this correctly, but is that right?
No, I mean, typically I just play standard. When I play resonator, I play in a really different tuning. So it's not, I don't know if it's different. It's just, I discovered it. And so if I'm playing in a G, this is for Drew. If I'm playing in a G, I tuned the guitar from 6 to 1. It's DG, DG, DG.
Wow.
So it's
all fourths.
It's 1s and 5s.
Interesting.
And
okay.
And so, on some of my albums that I have some resonator on, you can hear that. And then there's a YouTube video out there called My Funky Slide Tuning, where I go into detail about demonstrating this. That's the only thing unique that I maybe do other than standard guitar, standard tuning.
That's really cool. Yeah.
I want to make sure that when we'll do this again later, but tell everybody where they can find you and find out about what you're doing and get information on the album.
Sure. Well, JimmieBratcher.com or the RevJB.com is where the record resides. And I treated this a little bit differently. And I'd like to talk about that if we can, if we have time.
Sure.
But we packaged the album in a book.
Mhm.
And so this is a 117 page, full color, glossy. Every page is glossy, not cheap to produce, by the way. And so every song has its own piece of art. All the players have a full bio and picture, and then in the back of the book is this round thing back here. This is called a CD. I know it might be new to some of you, but this is called a CD. So here's my thought on this: is that I really I learned just recently that I was not playing by the rules when it comes to streaming. And what streaming actually wants to see from music is they want to see a consistent stream of music. And a lot of people are saying they want to see a single every 4 to 6 weeks, not necessarily an album. So we decided on this one to kind of push back on that a little bit because streaming, as you know, pays Spotify pays their artists depending on who they are, but we make like a 30th of a cent on that. YouTube pays 1/600th of a cent. And so it really doesn't pay the bills. So what we did was we packaged this not just with the CD, but then there's a link here to a page, to a private playlist that you can stream from your phone. You can do it anywhere you are. So you get the book, which is basically an extended liner note, CD, streaming access, and then early access to everything that we create. So all the videos, all the behind the scenes stuff, all of those things are all on there. And we're selling these for $30. And the reason we do that is that 100% of all the funds that we make off of our albums, books, those things, it all goes into our not-for-profit. And then we use those to fund the prison events, the homeless events, all of those things that we do. And the 30th of a cent thing from Spotify just wasn't helping us enough to be able to afford to do those things. So we kind of pushed back a little bit on it. And so far, the album's been out less than a month. We probably made enough money to I'd probably easily to say that more money than we'll make in 5 years on streaming. And so that's it's not a lot when you're streaming monthly checks about $20 a month. So and I have 8 hours of music online. So anyway,
yeah. So let's talk a little about where you take your music. You already said that you take it into the most hostile environment known to man, the church, which
so much anymore. But when I first started, it was like, what?
Yeah,
what the hell is that? Kind of thing.
Your mileage may vary depending on the church, but yeah, I get it. But you also are very committed to taking your music into prisons and to the homeless. And so how did that become a part of what you do?
I started going to prisons in 1981 when I was still, before I got liberated from not playing the devil music. And, but I've always had this desire in my heart that I want to always continue to be in a position where I can give to people and they can't give me anything. They can't buy a ticket. They can't buy a CD. I want to be able to give them something. And so, we started that when we started this phase of our life in 2000. We started doing that with intention. And then it got to where, hey, I wanted to do this on a bigger scale. So we started raising the money then, and we do that every year. We raise the money to be able to fund to take the whole band, the whole crew, and all of those are paid professional people. And we go into the prison and we give them the absolute best show that we can possibly put on. And we do that because we recognize the value in those people. When we walk in, like we were in a women's prison yesterday, And it just breaks my heart, to see these women and men that have made some really ugly, awful choices. And I see them and I'm thinking, man, this is somebody's baby, somebody's little girl or somebody's little boy. And I know in my own life the power of transformation. And I want to do something that would inspire them to reach out to Jesus and say, can you help me? And so that's always been the catalyst for those. And we just try to follow the doors that are open for us. So right now, the doors here in the Midwest are just starting to open for us in Missouri, which is where I live. But in Kansas, we've been doing that for the last 22 years, and then some in Florida as well. We've done prisons all over America, but Kansas has been our main focus.
So if you've been playing in prisons for 40 plus years,
Yeah.
You're probably playing to the same people. If you're
Sometimes-
going to visit the same prisons every year, every couple of years,
right.
you're seeing some of the same people, right?
Yeah, we are. I was sitting here at the house a couple of weeks ago, and my phone went off, and it was a number that I wasn't in my phone, so I didn't know who it was, and I picked it up, and I read the text, and the text said, "Got out on Sunday, got a phone on Wednesday," and I'm like, "Who? Congratulations! Who is this?" And it's a guy that we have seen for the last 20 years, guitar player from here in Kansas City. I don't know what his crime was. I don't want to know what his crime was. But so we've been seeing him for 20 years.
Right.
And he got out and is doing real good right now.
Good.
So yeah,
Awesome.
definitely. We get to see a lot of people over and over again. One of the prisons that I'll mention, we'll be there on June 14th in Ellsworth, Kansas. Remarkable place. The chaplain and the warden got together and they raised $500,000 in private money, and they petitioned the state first to allow them to form a not-for-profit. They raised $500,000 and they built what they call the Spiritual Life Center inside the gate, inside the fence of the prison. And everything starts and ends. The warden told me this last summer. We were standing there and he points out at the Spiritual Life Center and he goes, everything in this prison starts and ends there. And it's all faiths, but that's the focus. And now Kansas, the state of Kansas has said, we'll have that model in every prison. And the musicians for the church there, that's their full-time job. They get up in the morning, they go to the chapel, they work 8 hours a day on music.
Wow.
And tremendous musicians. We're hoping, we're just starting the planning of doing a live concert there and filming it, which is very difficult to do in prison.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. That is awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
You
cool.
guys should come and go with us sometime.
I'd love to do that if you're serious.
Absolutely.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need roadies.
Yeah. You don't want me to play anything.
Drew looks like he's a roadie.
No. Listen,
Drew-
I will carry an amp with the best of them. I do it every weekend. I've got you down.
Yeah, Drew could actually play though. He could be some use to you.
Cool.
So if people aren't homeless and they're not in a prison, where are they going to be able to see you play?
Well, my schedule's on the website. We don't have a typical tour schedule. So we are, we have dates coming up in Green Bay on July 2nd. It's a church date. We have a date on Father's Day in Troy, Pennsylvania. Those are fly dates. And so we're just out, wherever we get the invitations, we go. I mean, everything that we do right now is based off of relationships. So people that I know, people that know me. And so we're not out in a lot of the tour circuit that like the Cold Stairs would be on,
right?
Or the typical blues circuit. Not that we're against that. It's just, I don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to get booked into those things. And then you add in the faith element of what I do, and people are very hesitant to embrace that. And until they've experienced what we actually do, because there's, one of the songs, Kevin, you'll know that Jim Richards, who is how I met Kevin, wrote together is a song called Bad Religion.
Yeah.
And, because I've experienced that abuse of religious abuse in my own life based on me allowing people to abuse me that way. But nevertheless, I've spent a good deal of my adult life trying to combat that and create a different model for people to understand. So I'm very sensitive when we're playing live like that. But in a typical venue, they don't know that. And
Right.
so, until there's some kind of relational connection that says, hey, you should try this. And then, something that we can afford to do because I pay my band very well because I believe that musicians are seriously underpaid. And I want them to know, I want any of the guys that work with me, I want my goal, mine and Sherry's goal has always been, we will pay them and we will treat them like royalty. And so we stay in nice places, we eat good food, and we have a lot of fun, and we do our best to play just as well as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Sure. It's awesome.
Yeah. I've said a few times on social media when I've talked about you and your album and coming on the show, and I mentioned it to Drew. I said Jimmie Bratcher is the real deal. That's the best way I know how to describe him.
Thank you.
Because from a faith standpoint, you do the things and you go to the places that far too many of us do. And from the music standpoint, you play what's true to you, what's in your heart, and it's authentic.
Okay.
And that's the real deal.
Thank
And that's that I don't know any better way to describe what I know of you anyway.
Well, I have a verse of scripture that's been a model for me in the last 23 years, and it's Mark 12:37, and it's just a little sentence commentary about Jesus, and it says this. It says, "And the common people heard him gladly," and that's my goal. I want to present faith to people in a way that's true to who Jesus is, and in a way that they can hear and be glad that they heard it. And that makes what I do a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a lot of fun, let's talk some about the album. We've talked around it and mentioned it a few times, but let's really kind of dig into this a little bit. The album is called Far Enough. That is the first track on the album.
Yep.
And so let's just start there. Tell us Far Enough. Tell us about the song and why that is the name of the album.
Okay. Well, Far Enough is a story song about a couple of friends of mine, Mike and Clark. Far Enough, the story of Mike and Clark. Mike and Clark were guys here in Kansas City that were homeless alcoholics living in a box down by Knuckleheads, of all places. And Clark one disappeared for a few days, and when he came back to the box to see Mike, he opened the box up and he stuck in two things, a gun and a Bible, and said, "Pick one." And Mike had a decision to make, and that's a hard way to make a decision right there. And he chose the Bible. And the rest of the story, which I can't tell in the song, is that Clark, his name's Gail Clark, if you've seen my album The Electric Rev, he painted the cover of it.
Okay.
And he became a world-renowned folk artist. Mike O'Neill he produced my Electric Rev album, as a matter of fact, in his studio in Nashville. He became known in Nashville as the counselor to the stars. He had 3 addiction clinics that he started, and he helped many, many music celebrities get clean from their addictions. Some that you would know. One of them, I'll tell you her name, was Tammy Wynette. And
Wow.
and so, when you see people like that, they're homeless alcoholics living in a box. Is there any hope? And the answer is yes, there is. The tag at the end of the song says, the work in me is not complete and my edges may be rough. How far can God's mercy reach? Far enough.
It's a good word.
There you go. There's the electric rev. When I released that to the Christian market, all the press came back and said, "Why you got all them snakes on there?" And I said, "Well, it's good to keep. If you notice, they're all running away, so it's good to keep the snakes running from you." That's what I got to say about that.
Okay. So, all right, you make that comment. So let me ask this question: How do you do a different show? I mean, if you're playing at the prison, or if you're playing at, First United Baptist Church of Jesus, do you play anything different? Do you do anything different?
Nope, I don't. I think that the church people need to hear what the people in the bar hear, and the people in the bar need to hear what the people in the church hear. So, I will, choose songs that I think are appropriate, especially if I'm going to preach. I'll choose songs that I think are appropriate that go with the message or the theme of whatever I'm involved in at that time. But I've tried to groom, and I had to learn that just through, the process of walking through it. I've tried to learn how to be able to communicate to people. I'll tell this story, kind of how that came about. I was invited to Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, which was the most violent prison in America, which was reformed. And we were doing a walkthrough, and the warden opens up a door, and as we walk in, and he goes, "This is death row. There's 90 men here that are condemned to die." And I walked up to the first cell and started talking to this guy. And this was early, like maybe 2001. And I quickly realized that I didn't know how to talk to him. I knew how to talk to him if he was experienced in church culture, but I didn't know how to talk to him man to man, because I had been so indoctrinated into the religious culture, which I'm not saying is bad. It's just the reality of where I was at. And from
it can be ineffective.
It
right?
was in that setting, it was ineffective. And so I came back and started just tearing apart my life, my vocabulary, and saying, how can I communicate the truth of Scripture in a way that common people can understand? So no, I don't do anything any different. I tell all the same stories that I've told on here. My grandmother paying for my divorce, and the little country church, and all of those things. So,
yeah, and there are some, obviously, some songs that are very straightforward with that message, the message of redemption, the message of God's grace, and there are some on this album that you could really hear it anywhere, anytime, and nobody would peg it as, oh well, this is a Christian song,
right?
I mean, the songs like
why is it we don't dance anymore?
Why is it we don't dance anymore? Is a perfect example.
Don't count me out.
Yes,
Memphis Slim.
They're just fun, upbeat, good, really good songs.
Well, I'm a songwriter. My friend Eric Stark, he's a songwriter. Eric was a worship leader in the church for 29 years. And I don't want to, I love writing gospel songs, but that's not all I want to write about, because, I'm living life.
Right.
I want to write about, and I believe, like on my Secretly Famous album, there's a song called It Just Feels Right. And it's a song about meeting my wife. And it's not a gospel song in any way, but I can take you to the scripture and chapter and verse and preach you a message out of that song, but it doesn't dilute the fact that it's true. And
Right.
that's what I try to
Mhm.
communicate, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking about sleeping around and,
Right.
doing those kinds of things, but
One of my favorite songs on the album is "Don't Bring That Evil Around Here."
Mhm.
yeah,
That's a very straightforward message to it can be a message to church people, but it can be a message to anybody.
that song is a message to all of us, to culture, and it's about the culture wars, and it's about the root purpose of the culture wars, which is to keep us divided and to keep us fighting among ourselves, and which is really evil in itself. And as you know, with COVID, when it first started, I prayed and asked the Lord for a strategy, and Romans 12:21 popped into my heart immediately, which says, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my strategy for that whole time. It's like, I'm not going to get caught up and play the games that everybody else is playing, because they're making us jump around like a bunch of puppets and using fear and anything that they can to try to divide us. It's just not the truth. I bought a guitar a couple of years ago. I was wanting, Drew, like this. I was wanting like a Les Paul Jr., a double cutaway Les
Mhm.
Paul Jr., and I bought an Eastman guitar,
Okay.
and I bought it, and it showed up, and I opened it up, and in the case was a certificate of authenticity that said "Made in Beijing, China," and I said, I will not play this guitar. I mean, it was like, December 2020 or something, and I said, I will not play this guitar. I will not take it out in public. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. And then I was watching YouTube one day, and a video popped up of a tour of the Eastman factory. And as I was watching it, I was looking at the people working on and building the, high-end violins and cellos that they build, and the guitars. And as I looked at them, I thought, and these are just people like me. They're working a job. They're trying to raise kids. They just want to have a peaceful life. And so the government is dividing us from each other to use it for their own profit and their own gain. And so we had to speak out about it. I tell people, it's like when I started writing for the album, every song I wrote was the same. I hate the government. And go back, I had to go back and put in, I hate the government, but I love Jesus. So a lot of the songs that I had originally written, we kind of just left aside because they were way too harsh. But Don't Bring That Evil brings out that whole point of, if you want to just fight about who's right or wrong, we're all wrong. Jesus
Right.
is the only one is right. And so if we're going to sit down and fight about it, we're going to allow that to divide us, then we're just not right. And
Yeah.
we got to quit it. And I think, most people that I know, I'm around people that don't believe like me all the time. And we don't fight. We're not at each other's throats. And we have to find a way to get through this together. And unless we are willing to do that, we're never going to make it through it.
Yeah. That is very true. Very true.
That will preach, sir. It's almost like you're a reverend or something.
I wasn't preaching just for just to let you know. So,
All right. What is your favorite song on the album?
my favorite song is "My Name Is Sinner,"
Mm-hmm.
and because it talks about this homeless guy, and he tells in the song how that he lost love for everyone, and now he just doesn't love anymore. His heart's hard. He mentioned, one line says, he mentioned his dad and all he wasn't. He said, I'm just like him and there's nothing I can do. And so he's taken on this identity, and it's hopeless. I mean, it's really a dark, dark place. And there's no redemption for him in the song. And it's really an indictment to us to really help people, to help each other, to love each other. And so that, and then the song "Save Me from Myself," which is, I'm my own worst enemy.
Right.
I don't need any help screwing stuff up. I can do it really well, and save me from myself is just about that one thing. It's just a cry to God saying, "Can you save me from myself?" And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that song as well. I think it's fantastic. It really points the blame in the proper direction.
Yeah.
And also points towards what the answer is.
Yeah.
And the solution to getting us out of our own problems.
Sure.
What about from the standpoint? I mean, you played your album release concert a couple of days ago.
Yep.
Is there a song that you enjoyed playing live the most?
Well, it was, so we had an 11-piece band, 4 horns, 2 background singers, B3, piano, myself, drummer, bass and drums, and we didn't get to rehearse with the horn sections. And and those guys were just, man, they killed it. Everybody did. Everybody just really stepped up to the plate. And so we opened with a couple of my other songs, but the first song we played off the album, we played the album in its entirety, which I've never done that before. That was a feat. And the first song we played was "Why Is It We Don't Dance Anymore?" And the horns just came out. It was like, oh my goodness. And even though the song's written in B flat, Drew, I tuned my guitar up to a B to an F, and I tuned it up a half a step and played it like I would play it in a normal A position. But so that one was like, when I first heard that, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be good. And so Out of the Night, that, and My Name Is Sinner, which we got through that. The guitar solo on My Name Is Sinner is at the end, and we fade out. And so nobody knew how to end it. So they just left me hanging out with this big extended guitar solo. Somebody took a phone video of it. It's on my Facebook page. You can see it if you like, but that was a great moment too, as well.
Yeah.
Very good.
Super. That's super. Well, Jimmie, we appreciate you being on with us. It is, just, I believe, more than just a coincidence that we reconnected.
Yeah.
Me finding you liking a post that Chris Tappan made on the Cold Stairs, and then running into you at Knuckleheads last December.
Yeah, I was shocked. It's like, what?
Yeah, but I'd be scared to guess how long ago it was that we first met. It was at we have a common friend, Jim Richards, who has a church down in Huntsville, Alabama, and we met there. But it's got to be 25 years ago, maybe.
No, not quite. I met Jim in 2003, so it was
okay. Okay, good. So we're not as old as I thought we were.
Yeah. I just turned 69 just for the way it's done. Sherry says when I hit 70, I'm going to a new level of cool.
There you go. Well,
outstanding.
But your wife is a sweetheart, and I think is actually connected with my wife, and they stay in touch a bit. But it was a real pleasant surprise to get to reconnect with you.
Absolutely.
And I certainly intend that we'll connect again soon.
I so appreciate y'all having me on. I know I'm not a typical bourbon guy, but I appreciate that, and I as I told you before we went on, I love bourbon. And the problem is I love it too much. And, but I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being on with us, and we want to talk about whiskey, yes, but we also want to talk about music and music that we like and music that's authentic, and that certainly fits the bill with what you're doing, and especially with this new album.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So congratulations to you on the album, the success that you're having with it. And, I want to make sure everybody sees again, you can go to JimmieBratcher.com. You can get all the information on tour dates, how to get the album, support that, because this goes towards the ministry that they do in churches and to the homeless. And, you're going to places that most of us won't go. And to that, I say, God bless and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So, Jimmie, anything else you want to promote? Any social media that you want to tell everybody about?
No, I mean, I'm on all those platforms except Twitter. And so I'd love to connect with you. If you have any questions, you can shoot me questions. I try to respond to everything that I can, and love to connect.
Good deal. All right. Well, Drew, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at drew.crawley63. That's where the most up-to-date live date schedule is. As this is airing, I will be getting ready to take a short break from music for about 4 or 5 weeks, at least live music. I'm going to go see some festivals and then hit the studio. And then we'll be headed to West Virginia for about a week and a half, little local thing, local tour. So that'll be a good time. And otherwise, you can find me at drewcrawleymusic.com. And we try to keep that updated as well.
As for us, the show, you can watch our show on YouTube. You can subscribe to that channel there. That way you will not miss a show. We're also on podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. We have a YouTube page where we post all of our shows. We have a YouTube group where you can post what you're listening to that night, what you may be taking a drink of that night, and post stuff there, because you may be drinking something that people aren't familiar with or haven't tried in a while. And same thing on the music side. We like to share with each other and learn from each other. So be sure to participate in all of that. And we have a show coming up next week.
Oh, this is going to be a good one. We've got our friends from Mojo Thunder coming onto the platform. I know a few of those guys. They are whiskey fans, and they are just a killer rock and blues and southern rock band. They're what's up. So you will enjoy that show for sure.
Yep. Good group of guys from Lexington, Kentucky that actually just got back from touring in Europe. So we'll get to talk to them about all of that and what all they've got in store. Really, really talented group of guys. So once again, thank you, Jimmie, for joining us.
Absolutely.
And on behalf of Jimmie and Drew and myself, until next time, cheers, love, and Freebird.
Cheers.
Good night, folks.